The story begins on Riverine Island, a secluded paradise known for its enchanting summers. Each year, when summer arrived, the queen would handpick a group of young men to visit the island for a 3-month stay. But this wasn't just any vacation, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. These men were suitors, chosen for a rare honor, the chance to win the hearts of the daughters of House Riverine. The island only opened for suitors when the Riverine daughters turned 17, the age when they could choose their future husbands. They called it the magic summer. Leah Riverine, the fourth daughter of the house, had just turned 17, and she was ready. Among the suitors were Count Rosemorn, who came bearing jewels as extravagant gifts, and Antoine, the second son of Count Gull, who brought nothing but heartfelt poems. Leah was overwhelmed by all the attention, so she asked for permission to step outside. To breathe, to think, and to clear her head before making such a life-changing decision. As she wandered through the gardens, lost in thought, she encountered another suitor, Duke Julian Ryandel. A war hero, known for his pivotal role in winning the First Imperial War, Duke Ryandel carried himself with calm confidence. Leah was stunned, not just by his reputation, but by his striking presence. She asked if he was also just out for a walk. But the Duke had come for a different reason. He brought her a gift. A ripe, golden peach from his estate, freshly picked and glistening in the sun. With a warm smile, he offered to peel it for her and gently fed her a slice. As she took a bite, he said with a twinkle in his eye, "They say if you eat a June peach, you'll live forever." Leah laughed and teasingly asked, "Are you proposing to spend forever with me, Duke Ryandel?" He didn't answer, just gave her a quiet, mysterious smile. Leah blushed. Her heart fluttered. She couldn't help but imagine a fairytale ending, marrying Duke Ryandel and living happily ever after. But the dream shattered just as quickly. After that day, Duke Ryandel began avoiding her. He kept his distance. He never explained why. Confused and hurt, Leah turned her attention to Antoine, the kind, poetic soul who never stopped showering her with affection. And so the summer passed. On the final day of the magic summer, the suitors lined up for Leah's decision. Antoine promised her a lifetime of gentle love and warm hugs. Count Rosemorn tried to win her over with glittering jewels. But Duke Ryandel said nothing at all. Thinking with her heart, and swayed by kindness, Leah chose Antoine. She would later realize, it was the wrong choice. On her wedding day, her sister Bella asked her one last time, "Are you sure you love him?" Leah wasn't sure what love really was. But Antoine seemed sweet. So she smiled and said, "I'll be happy." Years passed. Leah was nearly 40 now. And the truth. That promise she made at 17, it was a mistake. Antoine, the man who once gave her flowers and poems, turned out to be poor, untalented, and powerless. He gambled away what little they had, chasing dreams that never came true. They lived in near poverty. When Leah suggested selling their land and moving back to Riverine Island, Antoine flew into a rage. He threw a plate at her. It scratched her cheek. But still, he clung to his pride. Then, one day, a knight from the Ryandel Duchy arrived with an offer. Duke Ryandel wanted to buy the orchard on their estate, immediately, and for a surprisingly high price. Leah didn't know why the Duke would want a remote orchard, but she didn't care. The money could give them a fresh start. But within 6 months, Antoine gambled it all away. They were back to nothing. One night, Leah brought soup to Antoine's room. He was sick, but he just screamed at her to leave. So she did. She walked alone under the moonlight. The lavender had started blooming, it always did around her birthday. She realized, she was 40. And miserable. Tears rolled down her cheeks, as she whispered a silent wish. If only I could go back, just once, to when I was 17. And somehow, she did. In a flash, Leah was 17 again. It was her second magic summer. She couldn't stop smiling. The weight was gone. Her heart felt light and free. As she wandered, soaking in the joy, she saw him, Duke Ryandel, just about to hand her that peach again. But this time, Leah remembered everything. After giving her the peach, history repeated itself. Duke Ryandel ignored her once more. Count Rosemorn, as always, smothered Leah with jewelry. Antoine's poems were still as childish and naive as ever. It felt like nothing had changed from her first life. But something was different. And soon, everything would take a turn. 3 months passed, and it was time for proposals. This time, Leah turned Antoine down. After everything she'd been through, she understood how vital money was. She figured, even if she didn't love Count Rosemorn, his wealth could at least shield her from the misery of poverty. She also thought, if she didn't love him, he couldn't hurt her. So in her second life, Leah chose Count Rosemorn. But once again, she was wrong. Count Rosemorn treated her like a fragile jewel, something to be locked away and guarded. He kept her confined to a luxurious room that felt more like a vault than a home. Servants were ordered to doll her up constantly, but no one ever asked what she wanted. He never cared about her interests, her dreams, or even her comfort. On her 40th birthday, Count Rosemorn arrived with other women, clearly not just for the celebration. He coldly wished her happy birthday, and then told her the banquet was cancelled due to an urgent business trip. When Leah asked to visit her sister Bella, he refused, claiming it was too dangerous outside. Despite the diamonds, the silks, the palatial life, Leah felt hollow, sick with regret. She couldn't believe she had made 2 terrible choices in 2 different lives. Sitting alone in her room, she spotted lavender, her favorite flower, blooming in a vase by the window. It reminded her of her birthday, of lost time, and of all the promises she made to herself. Desperate for one last chance, she clutched the lavender and whispered a plea. "Please, let me go back. Just once more. I swear I won't make the same mistake." And just like that, she was 17 again, standing in the lavender fields, tears in her eyes. This time, she turned to her sister Bella and made a promise. "I'm not getting married," she said firmly. That evening, during dinner in the Riveren family dining room, Duke Riveren brought up the usual topic, Leah's suitors arriving soon. But Leah stunned everyone by declaring, "I won't marry anyone." Her father was furious. He stormed out of the room. But Leah didn't budge. Not this time. She was done being pushed into choices that weren't hers. Weeks passed peacefully. Then came the first week of June, and with it, the arrival of the suitors. Antoine, still reciting cheesy verses. Rosemorn, still treating her like a porcelain doll. And then, there he was, Duke Julien Ryandel. Dashing as ever, with that familiar peach in hand. Julien smiled and asked, "Have you ever tasted a peach before?" Leah casually replied, "Yes," and described its flavor in detail. Julien looked confused. "Have you visited my estate before?" Leah shrugged playfully. "No, you gave it to me." His confusion deepened. Leah realized she was getting ahead of herself. This version of Julien didn't remember anything. Quickly, she corrected herself. "Actually, no, I haven't had it yet." Then she leaned in and asked, "Would you peel it for me?" As Julien peeled the peach, juice ran down his hand. Leah reached out to help roll up his sleeve, but then, on impulse, she did something bold. She gently licked the juice from his fingers. Julien turned bright red. He stepped back, flustered. Elle Leah. She raised a brow. You can't just call me by name without permission. Julian awkwardly apologized. But Leah, amused by his nervousness, smiled and told him it was okay. Julian then brought up a rumor he'd heard, that Leah wasn't planning to marry anyone. Leah didn't hesitate. Why does that matter? It's not like you were going to propose. Julian blinked, surprised. What makes you say that? Leah shrugged. You never proposed in my previous lives. You always avoided me. I just assumed you weren't interested. Julian was speechless. To lighten the mood, Leah said, Don't worry, I'm not mad. We barely talked. It's not like we had time to fall in love. She watched his reaction carefully. He looked intrigued. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You're different, he said. You speak like someone with both past and future in your eyes. Maybe she thought she'd never see him again. Or maybe it was his calm presence. But for the first time, Leah told someone the truth. She shared everything, about her first life, her second life, and the mistakes she made in both. Secrets she had never spoken aloud. Julian listened quietly. Then, with a thoughtful look, he asked. In your past lives, did you die? The question stunned her. It was oddly specific, almost too specific. But maybe, she thought, he was just curious about the afterlife. Or maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as ordinary as he seemed. Leah explained to Julian that she hadn't died in her past lives. She had simply returned, always on her 40th birthday, while looking at lavender and wishing with all her heart for another chance. As they walked together, Julian gently pointed out. So, this is your third life now. Leah smiled confidently. At this point, I'm probably older than you. But then, something in Julian's eyes caught her attention. You know, she said, narrowing her gaze, your eyes, they look like they've seen a lot too. She paused. Do mine look like that? Julian didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked at her with a small smile and said, They are stunning. Deep and beautiful. His words made Leah's heart flutter. Trying to stay composed, she quickened her pace and clarified. What I meant was, my eyes have changed. They hold more secrets now than when I was younger and naive. She added, almost as a reflection. Even though I'm older, I'm not sure I'm wiser. Age doesn't make someone a better person. Then she gave an example close to home, her father. My dad's older than anyone I know. But he's not exactly kind or wise. Julian chuckled and nodded. I get that. My father worked in the palace. He was always too busy, and then he died when I was still young. He looked off into the distance. I barely remember him, except for one thing. Whenever he was home, he'd take my mother and me on long walks. Then, in a quiet, unexpected moment, Julian wrapped his arms around Leah in a gentle hug. She froze, cheeks burning. As they pulled apart, he smiled and said, That's the kind of hug my father used to give my mother. Before Leah could fully react, a familiar voice called out her name. It was her nanny, frantic as always, followed closely by Julian's servant, who reminded them to prepare for dinner. As they were about to part ways, Julian turned to her and asked, Would you like to walk again tomorrow morning? Leah nodded, smiling. I'd like that. Julian's eyes softened. Thank you for talking with me. It's been so long. Leah blinked. Wait, what do you mean so long? Isn't this our first walk together? Julian simply replied. It's been 23 years, for you. Leah laughed, amused by his strange yet charming sense of humor. Well, Thanks for seeing things from my point of view. Then, as if remembering something, Julian asked. Do you have a light blue dress? Leah lit up. It's my favorite one. He smiled and said. Would you wear it tomorrow? Sure, she replied without hesitation. Before leaving, Julian took her hand, kissed it gently and asked. May I go now? Leah couldn't look away as he walked off, her heart doing things she had told it not to. That night at dinner, she wore her light blue dress. When Julian arrived and saw her, he teased. Wait, aren't you supposed to wear that tomorrow? Leah just grinned. Well, wouldn't it be boring if everything went according to plan? Duke Riveren noticed something in the air, a spark between his daughter and the Duke, but he said nothing. The dinner began. The usual small talk filled the table. Duke Riveren led the conversation, with Antoine and Count Rosemorn nodding along aimlessly, pretending to care. Julian, however, barely touched his food. His eyes were fixed on Leah the whole time. Leah tried to ignore it. She looked away, scolding herself. You're not falling for him. You're not marrying anyone. Remember that. But when she glanced back, Julian was still smiling. Then, leaning closer, he whispered something only she could hear. And in that moment, Leah's heart skipped. She didn't know what he said. But she felt it. Something was different this time. And maybe, just maybe, fate had one more twist left to give. After the feast, Leah asked if she could stop by her room to grab something warm. Antoine and Rosemond immediately jumped in, both trying to be chivalrous, offering their coats. But Leah politely refused. I can manage, she said with a small smile. Then Julian stepped forward, gently draping his coat over her shoulders. I'll walk with you. It's dark. Antoine tried to object, quickly volunteering to escort her as well. But before he could take a step, Duke Riveren intervened. I need to speak with both of you, he said firmly, gesturing to Antoine and Rosemond. With that, Leah and Julian were left alone. As they walked, Leah casually remarked. I think my father likes you. Julian glanced at her and, out of the blue, asked. Do you like me too? Leah stopped in her tracks. Does it really matter? She asked, surprised. It does, Julian replied without hesitation. She was caught off guard. In her past lives, he had always kept his distance. But now, he looked at her with the kind of eyes that made her question everything she thought she knew. Earlier that evening, Leah had asked her nanny to prepare the blue dress Julian liked, but there'd been a mix-up. The staff thought Julian had requested the dress for the dinner itself, not the next day, and the maids jumped to conclusions. She's marrying Duke Ranel, they whispered. Leah had shut it down quickly, clarifying that she wasn't getting married. Not again. But now, standing next to Julian in that very dress, she was beginning to waver. Suddenly, Julian asked. What are you thinking about me right now? Leah looked away, unsure. I used to be annoyed by you. You always avoided me. But now, you seem like a good person. When they reached her room, Leah grabbed her shawl and turned to find Julian waiting patiently. But before they left, he softly asked. Would you hold your shawl aside for a moment? Confused, she did as he asked. I just want to see you in that dress one last time, he said, his voice quiet but sincere. Leah playfully teased him. You're staring. Julian only smiled. Because you're beautiful. Leah couldn't help herself. Why did you want me to wear this dress? Have you seen me in it before? Julian hesitated, then nodded. I have. You wore it once before, and you looked just as beautiful then as you do now. That's when Leah began to notice the odd phrasing. Still, as always, it felt like he'd known her forever. She didn't hold back. Julian, what's going on? You speak like you know me. Trying to piece it together, she asked if he had attended her sister Bella's wedding, the one where she wore this very dress, and recited a poem. Julian lowered his gaze and confessed. Yes. I saw you there. Excited and confused, Leah urged him. Tell me the truth. He took a deep breath. I wanted to see you in that dress again, thinking it would satisfy me, but seeing you now, it only makes it harder. Harder to do what? She asked. To give up, he whispered. His voice cracked with emotion. You're everything to me. No one else comes close. I thought maybe you'd find someone perfect. Better than me. Then Julian reached into his coat pocket, knelt before her, and pulled out a small velvet box. I'm not perfect, he said, but I'll do everything I can to become someone worthy of you. Opening the box, he showed her the ring. I vow to dedicate my life, body and heart, to you. In this life, and the next. Leah stood frozen, her cheeks flushed. She asked him to stand. I don't want to get married, she said honestly. It's never brought me happiness. Julian stood and gently replied. Then I'll bring you so much happiness that the pain won't stand a chance. Still unsure, Leah tried to push him away. You could find someone better than me. But Julian shook his head. There's no one better. Not to me. He wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, pulling her close. I want to start our life together as soon as possible. Then Leah asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Do you love me? Julian didn't hesitate. I've loved you since the first moment I saw you. Leah bit her lip, heart pounding. But, what if this is my last chance? What if I disappear again at 40? Julian looked into her eyes, full of conviction. Then I hope this is the last chance. Because if we marry and you vanish, I don't want to be left wondering what we could have had. Leah asked him if he ever imagined them growing old together. Julian smiled. I've imagined it more than 100 times. But that's just imagination, Leah whispered. No, Julian said, what matters is your heart. In that moment, Leah finally understood what had been missing all along. She admitted something she had never said out loud. In both of my past marriages, I never loved them. Not even once. Maybe if I had, I could have endured what they put me through. Julian took her hand. You don't need to worry about that, he said with quiet certainty. Because you will love me. His sincerity made Leah's heart soften. And just like that, for the first time, the idea of marrying again didn't seem so terrifying. That night, as Leah lay in bed, memories of her past lives washed over her. In her first life, she married Antoine because he was kind, but her heart never felt anything real. In her second, she married Roseman for wealth, but ended up imprisoned by luxury she couldn't escape. But now, with Julian, everything felt different.
After her experience with Antoine, Leah knew deep down she never truly loved him. And she realized how foolish it had been to believe that living without love would somehow make things easier. So when she finally decided she wouldn't marry again, Julian's words echoed in her heart. You will love me. And strangely, she felt butterflies. Even if she wasn't ready to admit it yet, something about him stirred her. The next morning, Leah looked exhausted, but she still went to see Julian. He lit up the moment he saw her. He brought up the proposal from the night before, and Leah gently told him that he might be waiting a long time for her answer. With a warm, patient smile, Julian replied, I'll wait. As long as you let me stay by your side. Their conversation drifted toward hobbies, Leah said she loved gardening and reading. Julian, thinking aloud, said he might enjoy painting. Leah's eyes sparkled. Then paint me. She didn't waste a second. With excitement, she gathered the tools and even changed into a new dress for the occasion. As Julian painted, their eyes met again and again, and each time he smiled. A little more. At one point, Julian laughed, teasing, "Your face turns redder every time I look at you. How am I supposed to find the right colours?" Blushing, Leah fumbled for an excuse. "It's just the heat." Julian chuckled and suggested they take a short break. But as Leah turned to leave, she accidentally stepped on her dress and tripped. Julian lunged to catch her, but they both fell, Leah landing right on top of him. She winced. "You're hurt," Julian said, his voice serious. He gently scooped her into his arms and insisted on taking her to the doctor. Leah glanced at his face and hesitated. "Are you angry?" Julian shook his head. "No, I was just scared. I thought you were seriously hurt." Luckily, the doctor reassured them it was only a minor sprain and would heal quickly. Julian finally relaxed. Back at the estate, Leah pouted. "I was really looking forward to teasing you if the painting turned out bad." Julian grinned. "There's always next time." Leah mentioned she'd already asked the servants to prepare drinks in the hall and invited him to join her. Julian stood and offered his hand, helping her to her feet. As they walked together, Leah stole glances at him, her thoughts swirling. She'd never been escorted by a man outside of a banquet. Julian was so sweet and, she had to admit, incredibly attractive. Julian noticed her glancing. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Flustered, Leah quickly looked away. "No, not at all." Still concerned, Julian told her to let him know if she felt any pain. Leah smiled, thinking, how wonderful it would be to walk beside someone like him every day. Her mind wandered. She found herself imagining Julian in a more intimate way. Her cheeks burned. Did I really just think that? While he's right beside me? When they finally reached the hall, Leah let out a deep sigh. Her heart and mind were a mess. Is this love? She wondered. Have I already fallen for him, the moment he made my heart flutter? The thought of asking him to spend the night crossed her mind. And though the idea startled her, it stayed. Despite her inner turmoil, the rest of the day passed without trouble. As night fell and they prepared to part ways, both expressed how much they'd enjoyed the day. Then Julian softly asked, "Can I see you again tomorrow morning?" Leah hesitated, then voiced something that had been bothering her. "I'm starting to feel like you've forgotten that you proposed to me. You're treating me more like a friend than someone you want to marry." Julian took her hands in his. "I haven't forgotten, not for a second. I've been thinking about you all day, cherishing every moment, knowing I won't get them back." Then he knelt down again, holding the ring. "I still want to marry you. Please say yes." Leah paused, then finally said, "All right, but on one condition." Julian's eyes lit up. "Anything, just name it." Looking him straight in the eyes, Leah said bravely, "I want to spend the night with you, just once." Julian was stunned. Then he smiled. "You haven't changed a bit." Leah shot back playfully. "You haven't known me long enough to say that." Julian laughed. "Well, I'll take your condition, if it means you'll truly consider marrying me." Leah didn't beat around the bush. She spoke of her failed marriages, how she no longer had faith in the idea of marriage. She admitted she had no expectations, except perhaps in the bedroom. "I'm not sure I want to be your wife," she said honestly, "but I do want to be with you." Then she asked him, bold and unafraid, "Kiss me." Julian was caught off guard, but only for a moment. Then he kissed her, first on the forehead, then the cheek, and finally their lips met. Not wanting to waste another second, Leah pulled him to her room. The next morning, Leah awoke in Julian's arms, her head resting on his chest. He was already awake and smiling, holding her close. "Just 5 more minutes," he murmured. "I want to stay like this." Leah grinned, watching him, and whispered, "I think I love you too." She said think out of embarrassment, but Julian froze, feeling like she was teasing him, until she added, "We're getting married." Julian shot up. "Really? Can I tell everyone?" Leah laughed. "Yes. Go." He quickly got dressed and kissed her forehead again. "Don't worry about a thing. Just rest. I'll take care of the rest." Word travels fast. House Ranel had been a pillar of the kingdom since its founding. Julian, the 19th Duke of Ranel, was not just a nobleman, he was a war hero. At just 15, he took his father's place in the First Imperial War, earning honours that rivaled even the previous duke. Strangely enough, he wasn't famous for his good looks. But today his name spread for another reason. Leah was still sleeping when her bedroom door burst open. Her little sister Marianne ran in, followed by Bella, Beth, Margaret, and even their mother. They had all heard the news. Leah and Julian were getting married. The maids cheered. Her father beamed with pride. Apparently, Julian had told everyone. Word spread like wildfire. Before long, all of Riveron knew. As for Antoine and Rosamond, they were politely shown the door. After Leah's family lost their noble status, Duke Riveron gave his consent for her marriage. A royal messenger was promptly dispatched to the capital to seek Her Majesty's approval. Leah could hardly believe how quickly everything was unfolding. As she made her way to see Julian, fate brought them together midway. They'd bumped into each other by chance, and to her surprise, she realized her nanny had dressed her in an outfit that perfectly matched Julian's. Flustered, she took his hand, and they walked together in quiet harmony. But Leah's curiosity soon got the better of her. "Julian," she asked softly, "why did you fall in love with me?" Julian paused, searching for the right words. But before he could answer, a voice interrupted. "Leah." "Julian." It was Bella, accompanied by another one of Leah's sisters. In an instant, Julian was whisked away by the enthusiastic siblings. Leah barely had time to react before Bella grabbed her arm. Moments later, Leah found herself seated with her sisters, sipping tea and chatting. Bella seemed genuinely happy for her, which surprised Leah. In the past, Bella had voiced concerns when Leah was engaged to Antoine. But now, she seemed calm, almost proud. Curious, Leah asked, "Did you know Julian before? He said he saw me at your wedding." Bella blinked. "No, that was the first time I ever saw him." Then, suddenly, Bella stood and gasped. "Wait, did he fall in love with you at my wedding and came all the way here just to marry you?" Leah nodded, cheeks warming. Bella grinned. "You've really fallen for him, haven't you? I can see it in your face." Leah laughed nervously. The same me who once swore off marriage, now completely caught in his spell. Overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotions, Leah politely excused herself from the gathering. As she descended the stairs, her thoughts wandered. Was she really getting married? So soon? Everything was happening so fast, and she hadn't had time to truly reflect. She stepped outside and froze. Julian was standing there, smiling warmly. "I have an idea," he said. "Let's have our wedding right here, in the East Wing basement." Leah blinked in confusion, until she realized what he meant. The basement led to a secret garden. It was a hidden place, accessible only through a small back door, a place only Leah knew about. She had discovered it years ago and had shared it with Bella. No one else even knew it existed. "How did you find out about this?" she asked, wide-eyed. Julian smiled. "I noticed you always went there when you needed to think." Leah was stunned. How could he have known? had Bella told him. But she didn't press further. Instead, she welcomed him into her little sanctuary. "Do you think it's beautiful?" she asked. Julia nodded. Beautiful enough for a wedding. Leah was touched. Weddings were traditionally held at the groom's estate, especially for nobility. But ambition doesn't bind you. Tradition. "We can still have one at Ranelagh if you'd like, but I remember you once said you wanted to be married in a lavender garden." Leah gasped softly. He remembered. She had mentioned it only once in passing. "Oved," she whispered. "I hope this marriage will be different. Something that won't define my whole life, but will still be a part of something real." Julian took her hand. "Then let's make it real, in your way. How do you want it to be?" Leah smiled and listed the simple, heartfelt things she'd never had in her previous weddings. Julian listened closely, then gently embraced her from behind. "Everything you've asked for is more than reasonable," he whispered. "I'll give you all of it, and more. I just want you to be happy." Leah's heart fluttered again. She turned to face him. "But why do you love me, Julian? You only got to know me in this life." Julian shook his head. "No. I've always loved you. The wedding is set." Later, when Bella found out the wedding was scheduled for next week, on Leah's birthday, she was shocked. "Wait, next week? On your birthday?" Leah nodded with a smile. "It was Julian's idea. I thought it would be nice to keep it simple, just my nanny and my sisters." Now that preparations had begun, Leah and Julianne were finalizing the details. When the topic of her dress came up, Julian suggested the blue one, the same dress he had once complimented. Leah tilted her head. "You really like that dress, don't you? Why?" Julian smiled. "Because I like you even more when you wear it." Lately, there had been a growing trend among noble families, especially those with high titles, to skip lavish ceremonies. Instead, they'd have their marriage officially certified by the Queen. It was faster, simpler, and still prestigious. Only nobles of a rank higher than Marquess could request this. So when Julian presented Leah with the official marriage contract, she knew this was serious. As she read through the document, her heart softened. Every single request she had made, every detail she had shared, was written in that contract. When she looked up, Julian was watching her quietly. "Is there anything you want from me?" she asked. Julian gave her a soft smile. "Just one thing. Stay healthy and always stay by my side." And finally, the wedding day arrived. A week later, Leah arrived at the secret garden, accompanied by her sisters and nanny. Her heart fluttered with anticipation. She wondered what Julian had prepared for their special day. To her astonishment, everything she had dreamed of was perfectly arranged. The flowers, the decorations, the warm sunlight filtering through the leaves. It was exactly as she had imagined. She was overwhelmed by how thoughtful Julian had been. Even the music playing was her favourite childhood song. It felt like a new beginning, like magic. Then Julian appeared, dressed elegantly, his presence calming and radiant. He greeted Leah with grace, gently kissed her hand and whispered a compliment that made her blush. "You look breathtaking." He then placed a royal jewel in her hair, a gift that sparkled with a brilliance that matched her glow. With everything in place, Julian took her hand, and together they walked down the aisle. As they reached the altar, Julian turned to her and said, "Oh, I've been waiting for this moment, what feels like lifetimes. Out of all the souls that ever existed, I chose you. And despite the pain, the waiting, the unknowns, I've never once regretted it. Even if life rewound and began again, I would still choose you every single time." Leah's heart overflowed. She had no doubt anymore. She too would choose him again and again in this life and the next. A priest, brought by Julian, offered his blessings. He spoke of love binding them together, of enduring hardships side by side, and of finding happiness in the end. With gentle smiles and steady voices, they exchanged vows and sealed their union with a loving kiss. Time seemed to fly after the wedding. Leah and Julian rode by carriage to the capital, where they had an official audience with the Queen. Their marriage was formally approved. From there, their journey continued until they reached the Ral estate, Julian's home. As they approached, Leah noticed a tall fence near the river and wondered about its purpose. Inside the manor, she was stunned. The interior had been decorated to perfectly match her tastes. It felt like a dream she had unknowingly stepped into. Yet the image of that high fence lingered in her mind. Later, unable to hold back her curiosity, she asked Julian about it. He hesitated for a brief moment, then gently stroked her hair and replied, "Someone once fell into the river and didn't survive." Leah blinked. "They died?" Julian simply smiled, smoothly changing the subject. "You've been so busy looking around, I was starting to feel a little jealous. I wish you'd spare me some attention too." Leah raised an eyebrow, amused. "Jealous? You? With that face? I'm sure you've had plenty of admirers." But Julian looked serious. "No games, Leah. I've only ever had eyes for you." He leaned in, close enough for her to feel his breath. "You can believe me, or not. That choice is yours." Leah was left speechless, torn between laughter and awe at his sincerity. 3 months passed at the Ral estate, and to Leah's relief, she had grown to enjoy her new life. Julian remained kind and attentive, and despite her initial hesitation, she felt safe with him. But now Julian was away, travelling through the countryside to inspect his other estates. Without him, Leah found herself feeling a little lonely. Fortunately, her sisters, Beth and Bella, came to visit. The reunion was warm, and they quickly dove into exploring the estate. Beth especially was eager to see the library Leah had raved about in her letters. It exceeded her expectations, with towering shelves and an impressive collection of rare books. They continued the tour. A room filled with fine jewels and crafts, a luxurious dressing room, and a garden that reminded Leah of her secret hideaway back in Riveron. Leah even showed them rooms named after each member of the Riveron family, an idea Julian had insisted on. But when Beth asked about Leah's room, she smiled and said she didn't have one. She preferred to sleep with Julian each night. As they wandered further, Beth spotted a locked door and couldn't resist asking what was behind it. Leah shrugged. Julian said it's just a dusty old storage room, full of clutter, nothing special. Beth raised an eyebrow, then grinned mischievously. What if he's hiding something? A secret stash? Or maybe a secret woman? Bella gasped. Beth laughed it off, saying she was only joking. But the thought lingered in Leah's mind. All week, she couldn't stop thinking about that locked door. Julian had never given her any reason to doubt him. He was always so warm, so open. Still, something about that room tugged at her curiosity. What could be inside? The day Beth and Bella left, Leah stood in the hallway, alone again. The estate was quiet, too quiet. She looked at the locked door. Maybe it's nothing, she told herself. But her feet moved before her thoughts could stop them. Just a quick peek, she decided, and with that, she reached for the handle. Julian never tried to hide the key to the locked room. It was always right there in his office drawer. This casualness made Leah believe there was nothing particularly secretive about it. But curiosity has its own gravity. One afternoon, unable to resist any longer, Leah took the key and opened the door. To her surprise, the room was far cleaner and more orderly than she expected. It was quiet, almost sterile. Not the dusty storage space Julian had described. She brought in a lantern and looked around. That's when her eyes landed on a large board mounted on the wall. It was covered in writing, a list, cold and clinical, detailing various causes of death. High fever, lightning strike under the walnut tree, marriage, overturning near the river bridge, drowning in the estate lake, falling from the east tower, attack by unknown Unsal. The mention of the lake sent a chill through Leah. Julian had once mentioned someone drowning there. Her breath caught in her throat. As she examined the board closer, she saw that beneath each death entry there were strange notes. Details. And drowning in the lake, a line read, barrier recommended to prevent further incidents. Was the fence she'd seen meant to hide something, not just protect? Another note, under fall from East Tower, listed heights from which a person might survive a fall. Leah's blood ran cold. This didn't look like an investigation. It looked like planning. Plans for murder. Heart-pounding, she stepped back. And that's when she saw it. Her own portrait. Pale, framed, staring back at her from the wall. Before she could process it, a firm hand clamped down on her shoulder. She spun around. Julian. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was cold. I told you not to come in here. Leah's thoughts spiraled in panic. Who was this man? The one she married? Or a killer in disguise? Years before the wedding, Julian stood before Her Majesty in a tense meeting. He wasn't happy about it. The Queen had one goal: get him married. She even presented a portrait of his potential bride, Isabella Riveron, the eldest Riveron daughter and kingdom's most celebrated beauty. Julian wasn't impressed. Rather than object outright, he cleverly asked for a 3-year postponement, claiming he wanted to serve in the war. He promised to do her bidding after that. Privately, Julian was bitter. He believed marriage was nothing but a trap, especially after witnessing the toxic relationship between his parents. His father had been a heartless soldier. His mother, a royal by birth, was emotionally dependent and ignored. Julian had grown up in cold silence, a neglected child between 2 unhappy adults. He vowed never to end up like them. So he used the war as an excuse to buy time, 3 years of freedom. But time passed faster than he expected. Before he knew it, Julian found himself summoned again. The Queen smiled like she held all the cards. This time, she ordered him to visit Riveron Island for 3 months. He was to return with news of his engagement. Julian was furious, but masked it well. He wasn't going to marry anyone just because she told him to. On the journey to Riveron, he sat silently in the carriage, listening to the idle chatter of suitors Antoine and Roseman. It became painfully obvious the Queen had stacked the deck. She wanted him to stand out among the competition. This was all orchestrated for Leah. Julian vented to his friend Edmund upon arrival, annoyed and cynical. At the welcoming ball, Edmund asked if he'd seen Leah yet. Julian scoffed. She looks like she hasn't eaten in days to fit into that dress. Harsh words, but then he admitted, Leah was charming, beautiful even. Not my type, he concluded. When asked what his type was, Julian paused, then replied, someone calculating, cold, smart, but not too smart. Someone who doesn't care about marriage. Someone like me. Edmund raised an eyebrow. That sounds like Leah to me. Julian dismissed it. She's too assertive. Besides, I'm not marrying into Duke Riveron's business of selling off his daughters. Suddenly, Leah stormed over, clearly angry. But then, in a flash, her expression changed. She greeted him politely. Their first meeting had begun with fire. The next morning at tea, Julian and Leah sat in uncomfortable silence. She glared at him. He tried to stay cool. Then she broke the tension. I'll forgive you, she said, referring to his rude remarks at the ball. Julian raised a brow. Did I say something rude? Leah bristled. You know you did. An apology would be nice. Julian didn't budge. Instead, he turned the tables. Do you not agree your father treats marriage like a business? Leah was stunned. She had overheard him insulting her father the night before. Julian doubled down, criticizing the Duke's exploitation of the island's beauty and his daughters alike. Fuming, Leah stood and shouted, "There's no way I'd ever marry someone like you." Julian smirked. "Glad to hear it. If I'm ever forced to propose, do me a favour and reject me." Their tension was palpable. When Edmund heard what Julian had said to Leah, he was furious. "You didn't just avoid marriage. You humiliated her," he scolded. "If you hated the idea so much, you should have spoken to Her Majesty. Not ruin an innocent woman's chances." Julian was struck by the truth in Edmund's words. He had been cowardly. The next day, he tried to apologize to Leah, but she ignored him. He noticed her smiling at others, something he had never seen before. When she caught him staring, she snapped, "Want to insult me again?" Julian shook his head. "I just wanted to say sorry, I was wrong. About everything." To his surprise, Leah accepted his apology. He awkwardly called her by name, "Leah," only for her to snap again, saying he hadn't earned that right. Still, she let him speak. Julian surprised both of them by asking, "Can we be friends, at least?" Leah blinked. Friends? He admitted that, despite his behaviour, he liked her. She pushed him away. "You insulted me, you judged me." Julian softened. "I was wrong. And for the record, you have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen." Leah didn't respond right away. Then she turned and said, "There's nothing to criticize about your appearance either." Julian couldn't help but smile. Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't left such a terrible first impression after all. Leah wasn't about to let things get too soft. "Don't get the wrong idea," she added playfully. "That good impression you made? It didn't last long." Julian laughed. "Fair enough. So, what's the condition?" Since Julian had been speaking to her so casually, Leah assumed he now saw her as a friend. "Can I talk to you the way I do with my other friends?" she asked. Julian smiled. "Of course." With that, Leah gave him a light pat on the shoulder. "See you tomorrow, Julian." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Julian standing there, completely stunned. No one, not even his closest friend Edmund, had ever spoken to him like that, or touched him so casually. Quickly catching up to her, Julian asked, "Did the way I spoke to you make you uncomfortable?" Leah paused, then nodded. "A little. I just thought, if we're friends now, we should talk to each other more naturally. Fair is fair." Julian nodded, respectful. "Then I'll try to be more polite. Promise." Leah beamed. "Deal." The next day, Julian found himself standing alone in the lavender field, deep in thought. What did Leah like? Bella had to call his name 3 times before he snapped out of it. "Ah? Oh, sorry, Bella. Do you know what Leah's into lately?" Bella smirked. "She's been reading a lot of mystery novels." That was all Julian needed to hear. He thanked her and quickly excused himself, heading off with purpose. He spent the day finding a few mystery books, and even wrote a short letter to go along with the gift. In it, he thanked Leah for forgiving his earlier behaviour, and wrote that the books were a gesture to celebrate their newfound friendship. He couldn't help but wonder how she'd react. Julian arrived early at the tea hall, eager and a little nervous. He found Leah already there, but she didn't look well. "Are you all right?" he asked, concerned. She groaned softly. "I couldn't sleep. That book you gave me. I stayed up all night reading it." Julian's face lit up. "You already read it?" From there they slipped into easy conversation, dissecting the plot and characters. Leah praised Julian for being such a good listener. Julian, in turn, told her she was a gifted speaker. "You tell stories better than the authors themselves," he said, smiling. Leah blushed slightly. "I used to write stories too, but my father always said women shouldn't publish books." Her expression darkened. "Especially after marriage. No man wants a wife who suddenly decides to become an author." Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Then write a book. I'll publish it under my name." Leah looked at him, stunned. "Your future wife might not like that." Julian shrugged, grinning. "I don't plan on getting married, so that shouldn't be a problem." Leah laughed at his boldness. Then Julian leaned in slightly, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Or we could just get married. That way no one could object." Leah blinked. "Was that a proposal?" They both burst into laughter at the absurdity of it all. "Thank you," Leah said, once they'd calmed down. "But you don't love me." Julia waved it off. "Love is overrated." Leah raised an eyebrow. "Maybe you think that, but for me, love's way more important than just getting a book published." Julian studied her. There was something in the way she said it, something sincere, maybe even wistful. "Have you been in love before?" he asked. Leah smiled proudly. "Only in books." She offered to lend him one of her favourites, a romance novel. "You need to understand love before you go throwing around fake proposals." Julian chuckled and agreed. "All right, I'll read it." A week passed since that moment, and Julian found himself walking through Riveron alone, lost in thought. He couldn't stop replaying that day, when he teared up over a book, and Leah didn't tease him for it. Since then, they'd been talking about the novel whenever they had the chance. If anyone saw them now, they'd think they were old friends. Strange, considering their first meeting was a complete disaster. But Leah had forgiven everything and treated him kindly, like a real friend. Julian couldn't help but admire how clever and outspoken she was, though admittedly she could be a bit messy, which only made him smile more. Leah was extraordinary. While walking through town, he passed a dress shop and stopped in his tracks. In the window was a beautiful blue dress. Something about it reminded him of Leah. Elegant, striking, one of a kind. On his way back to the manor, Julian sat in the carriage, smiling to himself as he held the paper bag containing the dress. He couldn't wait to see her wear it. But by the time he arrived, rain was pouring down. In the parlour, he expected to find Leah, but she was nowhere in sight. Antoine soon entered, casually mentioning that he had just taken a walk with Leah and that she had slipped, so she went to change clothes. He was now waiting for her in the parlour. "Is she hurt?" Julian asked, worried. Antoine blinked, misunderstanding. "Oh, I'm fine. Just a little wet," he said smugly. Julian frowned. "I meant Leah." "Oh," Antoine shrugged. "She's fine. Don't worry so much. It was fun, though. Honestly, Leah's pretty easy to please. Just like any other girl." Julian's expression darkened. "What did you say?" "You know, that girl, Leah," Antoine replied with a smirk. "I bet she'll marry me. I mean, I don't get what's so special about her eyes anyway. Always acting all high and mighty. She talks too much too. I'm thinking of a way to make her." That's all Julian needed to hear. He threw a punch right into Antoine's face, silencing him mid-sentence. Antoine stumbled back, furious. "What the hell's your problem? Jealous because I'm the one she'll marry? She's just an easy girl." Smack. Another punch, harder this time. Before the fight could escalate further, Leah burst into the room. "Stop it!" she yelled. Without waiting, she slapped Julian across the face. "How could you? People get hurt when you hit them," she snapped. "Get out, Julian. I would never marry someone like you." Julian stood there, stunned and ashamed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Maybe it's better if I leave the island." He turned and walked out. Antoine was about to say something, but then he screamed out in pain again. Leah spun around in surprise and found her sisters, Jane and Lydia, the mischievous Riveron twins, hiding nearby. They had seen everything. "Antoine called you an easy girl," Jane said. "And Julian defended you," Lydia added. "Big time." Leah's heart sank. She had slapped the wrong person. Without thinking, Leah ran outside in the rain, desperate to catch up with Julian, but her shoes slipped and she fell hard on the wet ground. Julian, already a distance away, turned and rushed to her. "Here?" She looked up, soaked and muddy but determined. "I'm sorry," she blurted. "I didn't know what happened back there. I shouldn't have slapped you." Julian helped her up. "How did you even get involved?" she asked. "Because," Julian said simply, "you're my friend." Leah looked at him for a moment, then smiled through the rain. "Well then, as your friend, I forbid you from leaving." Back in her room later that day, Leah was reading when her maid entered with a package. "This looks like something of yours, miss." Leah opened it and found a note from Julian inside. Her heart skipped. Inside the box was the stunning blue dress she had seen in the shop window. She smiled, already planning to wear it to the ball 2 days later. The ball finally arrived. Julian, now recovered from his cold, stood tall and handsome in the hall, scanning the crowd. Then he saw her. Leah, in the blue dress, looked radiant. His breath caught. "You look beautiful," he said, walking up to her. Leah grinned. "Why did you get me this dress anyway?" Julian answered without hesitation. "Because it suits you. No one else could pull it off like you." "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked. "You've listened to my stories, read my books, gave me gifts, punched Antoine, and even took a slap from me. But you still keep saying nice things." Julian looked her in the eyes, steady and sincere. "Because I like you." Leah blinked. "You like me?" Julian nodded nervously. "It's why I wanted to be friends." "Did you get me the dress because you felt sorry for me?" "No," he replied. "I got it because you looked like someone who needed something beautiful, and Edmund said that when a lady's feeling down, sometimes a gift can help." Then Leah threw a curveball. "So, how do you apologize to a man?" Julian smirked. "A smile, and maybe a kiss. That's what your novels said." Without a second thought, Leah leaned in and kissed him on the lips. Julian froze, eyes wide, completely flustered. "That's my way of saying sorry," she said with a mischievous smile. Still red-faced, Julian stammered, "Well, would you like me to apologize too?" Leah nodded teasingly. He leaned in slowly, brushing a hand against her cheek. Just as her sisters burst into the hall, sending them both stumbling apart. Leah turned away, face flushed. She wished they had a little more time, alone. The next day, Julian was nowhere to be found, not at breakfast, not at lunch, not even at tea. Leah was disappointed and confused. Did he change his mind? She wondered. Did I read it all wrong? Spotting Julian's servant nearby, she hurried over. "Where is he?" "He caught a bad cold," the servant said. "He's been resting since the ball. Apparently he was out in the rain for 2 days before it." Leah gasped. Her maid chimed in, remembering something strange. She'd seen a figure standing outside Leah's window during those rainy nights, watching her. It must have been Julian. Leah rushed to his room. When she burst in, Julian looked up from his bed and gave her a tired smile. "Hey," he said softly. "You're sick," she said, clearly worried. Julian's gaze shifted. "What happened to your face?" he asked, noticing a small scratch on her cheek. Leah blinked. "I didn't even realize." "Come in here." She sat by the bed as Julian gently wiped the scratch with a handkerchief. Then, without a word, he pressed a light kiss to her cheek. Leah stared, surprised. "What was that for?" Julian grinned faintly. "My way of apologizing for not showing up yesterday." Leah helped him lie down again. "Sorry for disturbing your rest. I'll leave you alone now." As she stood, Julian grabbed her hand. "Don't go, you might get another scratch," he said, half joking, half serious. "Let me walk you back." After a little while, Leah couldn't resist agreeing. She gently placed her hand on Julian's forehead, telling him it reminded her of a childhood memory. When she was very ill as a child, she once thought she heard someone come into her room and place a hand on her forehead until she fell asleep. She'd always believed it was her father, even though he was never the affectionate type. He hardly paid attention to his daughters and often raised his voice at their mother. Still, whenever she recalled that moment, she couldn't quite bring herself to hate him completely. Julian opened up then, revealing that his own father wasn't much different. He told Leah about a time they visited a count's estate. During the trip, his parents had a terrible fight. His mother left that very day, and his father stormed off in anger. Neither of them realized they had left Julian behind. It took 2 full weeks before a servant was sent to fetch him, only because someone finally noticed he was missing. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, but he kept a small, bitter-sweet smile. Suddenly, Julian looked at Leah and said, "Duke Riveron is a lucky man to have a daughter like you." He admitted she deserved much better suitors than the ones Her Majesty had sent. None of them were worthy. Still, he was thankful, because their failures led him to her, to that radiant smile that had somehow become his favourite thing in the world. Just as he was about to say more, his eyes fluttered closed, and he drifted into sleep. The next evening, Julian returned to the dinner feast looking completely recovered. During the stormy night, someone had seen Antoine leaving the Riveron estate, and Count Roseman had quietly given up his pursuit of Leia once it became clear where her heart was leaning. Later, as they strolled hand in hand, Leah brought up the story Julian had shared about his father. She said that memories could be rewritten, that the past didn't have to define the future. She wanted to give him a new one. In this memory, his father might have been distant by day, but in the evenings he always made time for peaceful walks with his wife, just like they were doing now. And whenever she asked, he would pull her into a warm hug. Then, to demonstrate, Leah invited Julian to hug her like that. As he wrapped his arms around her, Julian wondered if she was trying to comfort him. Leah smiled and told him that from now on, if anyone asked, he should say his father was a kind man who loved him dearly. In that quiet moment, Julian realized Leah truly cared for him, from the depths of her heart. She reassured him that he was capable of love too. Julian smiled, warmth blooming in his chest. Without warning, he asked her to wait and dashed off. When he returned, he dropped to one knee, took her hand and kissed it. Holding out a ring, he proposed. Julian confessed he'd caught a fever from thinking about her non-stop and from worrying when he couldn't see her, even for a single moment. Meeting Leah had made him want to become better, and now he couldn't imagine life without her. He wanted her stories, her scoldings, her smiles every day. He asked her to marry him. Leah didn't hesitate. She smiled and said yes. But just as Julian let out a sigh of relief and joy, Leah added with a mischievous glint, "There's one thing I want to do before we get married." Julian, caught off guard but intrigued, asked, "What is it?" Still smiling, Leah leaned closer. "I want to sleep with you first." Julian froze. Leah explained that she wanted to be with the person she loved completely before marriage. Then, with a cheeky grin, she told him to come to her room around midnight. Julian was left completely speechless. Back in his room, Julian jumped into the shower, trying to calm down and collect his thoughts. It wasn't that he didn't want to. It was just that his nerves were off the charts. Eventually, he decided to take a walk, hoping fresh air would help. But somehow, his feet carried him straight to Leah's window. Not knowing if it was midnight yet, he hesitated. Then, gathering courage, he cracked the window open and softly called her name. To his complete shock, Leah popped up from the bathtub. Julian's face turned crimson in an instant. Leah, unaware at first that she was fully exposed, let out a loud scream and quickly dunked herself under water. Her cheeks flamed with embarrassment. "You're early," she scolded, hiding behind bubbles. "I haven't even finished soaking." Julian stammered, inching a little closer, voice gentle. He told her he was grateful for her courage earlier, and that this moment, though wildly unexpected, was one he would never forget. Then, leaning closer to the edge of the tub, his voice low and sincere, Julian whispered, "I love you." After that wild night, Julian and Leia took their sweet time enjoying each other's company. By late September, they threw a grand wedding celebration that had the whole kingdom buzzing. Soon after, their carriage rolled up to the Ranel estate. Leah, bursting with excitement about their new home, practically jumped out before it even stopped. But the moment she stepped inside, the excitement drained from her face. The place was dark, musty, and gloomier than she expected. Never one to back down from a challenge, Leah turned to Julian with her usual spark and declared, "This place needs a serious makeover." In less than 3 years, that lonely, cold manor transformed into something warm and full of life, beautiful and bright, just like the couple living in it. But while the house had changed, one small issue still cast a shadow on their love: their clashing personalities. One day, Julian heard that Leah had taken a tumble. Again. It wasn't the first time. Concern painted his face as he rushed to check on her, but his worry always came out sounding more like anger. Leah, hurt by his tone, couldn't help but feel discouraged. Julian and Leah were like polar opposites, different puzzle pieces trying to fit. Maybe the signs had been there since their very first clash. But back then they were so wildly in love they overlooked it all. Every time Leah got injured or into trouble, Julian's worry flared into frustration. He'd scold her, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Still, what Leah longed for was just a little gentleness, just some softness in his words. Their maid, Judy, often found herself caught in the crossfire of their arguments, feeling sorry for Leah. One day, things boiled over. Julian barked orders at Leah as if she were one of his soldiers, and she couldn't hold it in anymore. "Could you not talk to me like that for once?" she snapped. Julian, instead of hearing her out, cut her off. Leah had tried to open up, to explain how his tone shook her. She wasn't asking for flowers or poetry, just some kindness. But Julian, trying to avoid another blowout, told her to drop it. That was the last straw. Furious and hurt, Leah stormed out of the room like a hurricane. Back in her room, she let the tears fall. Judy was there, quiet but supportive, listening as Leah poured her heart out. "I know he cares," Leah said between sobs, "but would it kill him to say it nicely? His coldness, it's getting to me. I miss him." Despite her pain, Leah decided to be the one to make the first move again. Judy watched with a heavy heart. It always seemed like Leah was the one extending the olive branch. Julian, for all his affection, rarely took the lead in mending things. Julian's reactions were unpredictable. When Leah came home limping or bruised, he'd either explode with rage or ice over with silence. Both stung, and that pain often sparked Leah's own temper, launching them into yet another argument. But Leah hated prolonged silence. She'd always break it within a day. Julian, on the other hand, needed space to cool down or risk saying something worse. Later that evening, Leah knocked gently on Julian's door, took a breath, and stepped in. "I'm tired of this," she said softly. "Let's just go back to how we were. I miss you." She reached out. "Can I at least get a hug, a kiss?" But Julian couldn't meet her eyes. He wanted to hold her, to say everything she needed to hear, but the words wouldn't come. He finally muttered, "I'm trying. I just need a little time, please." But time wasn't Leah's strong suit. If Julian stayed silent too long, she'd break down and apologize just to bring peace. Yet deep down she wished that, for once, he'd be the one to take that step. They had a routine. After a fight, Julian would quietly bring her milk with syrup. They'd cuddle up and move on. But like clockwork, another spat would follow in a week or two. Their love was passionate, but the friction was exhausting. Then came the day Leah decided their room needed a makeover. She told Julian, and he offered to send servants to help. "Just wait for them," he said. Of course, Leah didn't wait. Julian found her on the floor, cradling a bump on her head amid a sea of fallen books. She had tried clearing the shelves by herself. His worry turned to anger. "I told you to wait," he snapped, furious. Leah froze. His rage stunned her. Seeing her shaken, Julian realized he'd gone too far. But Leah didn't stay quiet. "Why do you always blow up like this?" she asked, voice trembling. Julian's emotions knotted inside him. He regretted the outburst, but the words still tangled in his throat. As Leah opened her mouth to apologize, "Again," he interrupted her. He didn't want her blaming herself, but all he could say was, "We'll talk later." Leah wasn't having it. "No," she said, stepping forward. "I want a hug. Now." Julian avoided her eyes. Not a word. Leah's heart cracked. She shoved him back, stormed out, and before she disappeared, she shouted through clenched teeth, "I hate you."